Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Good morning to those that are listening to us over the Zoom link in Colombia. I'm very thankful to be able to meet you today in the presentation of Technische Universität Berlin, which is the German partner of this transnational Center for Just Transitions in Energy, Climate and Sustainability, along with Universidad Nacional de Colombia, today represented by Professor Rosario Rojas, Universidad Magdalena, represented by Andrea Cardoso Diaz, and our colleagues here at UCT, represented here in the panel by Michelle present. So today, my intention is to give you a little bit of an overview of what TRAJEX is, and hopefully also about what it may become. Especially because the reason why we're here in South Africa this week is to be able to begin weaving together the cooperation that will accompany us in the coming years. So what is TRAJEX about? TRAJEX is a DAD funded project that aims to support and strengthen transcontinental research, exchange and education towards a sustainable future. So it's a capacity strengthening, a capacity building project supported by the German government on climate and environmental action. And the way that we proposed this project was to focus on two very important aspects of climate change mitigation. On one hand, fossil fuel phase out and all the societal, technical, economic, political, ecological changes that this comes with, but also the fundamental changes in land management and ecosystem protection that genuine climate mitigation requires. We are trying to do so, focusing not only on the innovative, the nice part of transitions, installing renewable energies or adopting new agricultural practices, but also focusing on the harder and the more perhaps controversial part of transitions, which is also the deliberate termination or exnovation of certain practices, policies, energy carriers, and others. TRAJEX, more than one center, is a network that has three main hubs. One located in Europe that is coordinated by the Technische Universität Berlin, but works closely with Humboldt Universität Berlin and with Freie Universität Berlin. A second, which is the bigger hub located in Colombia, which is coordinated at Universidad Nacional de Colombia, but collaborates also with Universidad del Magdalena to strengthen and create this Latin American leg of TRAJEX. Can you hear me better? Okay. Yeah, so the third hub of TRAJEX is located here in South Africa at the University of Cape Town, and it's coordinated by our colleagues in South Africa. But more than these universities, we are a large network of organizations that are also in civil society, in think tanks, in labor unions, and also in some public administration. And the idea of this network is to be able to work as such and to strengthen the exchange between different perspectives on what just transitions are, should be, and may become. So what are TRAJEX's most central components? Basically, there are three. On one hand, we want to enhance study opportunities, for example, by reactivating two master programs here at the University of Cape Town, but also by creating joint teaching alternatives that are shared between Germany, Colombia, and South Africa, and also by providing a series of master and PhD scholarships, especially in Colombia and South Africa. Second, we want to strengthen research capacities. One of these things goes back to the idea of the network. We want joint research to be established. We want exchange to be promoted, but also we want to encourage and support our scholarship holders to engage in excellent research. And the idea of this is also to foster and encourage that new projects, new research projects, and funding for those projects is also acquired. And the third pillar is a lot on transdisciplinary capacities. So the idea is not to stay exclusively in the classroom or the research desk. The idea is also to go out there where the transitions are literally occurring, in the coal mines, in the agricultural frontier, for example, amongst others. And for that, there are also a series of measures, including these virtual dialogues that you are participating today, but also mobile schools in the front lines of the transition, as well as a series of renewable energy installations, both at Universidad Magdalena and here at the University of Cape Town. So far, we've advanced a lot on this reactivation of the two master programs at UCT, and we've provided the first cohort of PhD and master scholarships. Some of the scholars are present today. I'm very happy to see all these faces. But one of the most interesting parts of what we are trying to promote consists in trying to encourage other innovative ways of exchange. One of the things that has been very successful is a measure called Junior Research Days. We're basically facilitating that young graduates and students enrolled in postgraduate programs or young professionals are able to exchange within and also outside Traject's network. So for the first time in this kind of programs, we're also promoting short-term internships or research days that last year allowed us to support over 25 students that had a virtual exchange because of the pandemic. But this year we're en route to repeating that success, this time also physical. I'll already mention the PhD and master's, so I'll skip that. But I want to finish my presentation with kind of the most interesting results of our meeting so far in South Africa, and that is that also related to the topic of tonight's event. Trajects is an open invitation to establish a South-South North dialogue on just transitions and other very important topics that aims to change the terms of the conversation on these transitions that are unfolding. Sometimes we're not seeing them as transitions. Other times they're not occurring as transitions yet. But the idea of this notion of changing the terms of the conversation, changing the outcomes as well, is that by inviting different voices from different geographies, disciplinary backgrounds, and positions, among others, we can show that there is no one just transition, that there is no just one dimension of be it energy or agriculture or mobility, amongst others, that needs to be put into the spotlight, but that there are a diversity of transitions, and most importantly, that there is a diversity of views on these transitions, and what is just about them or unjust, on what the history of the processes and problems is that have led us to need the transition, amongst others. So I finished with an insight from these couple of days together with the Colombian and South African colleagues, and that is that we kind of found an important purpose together, that by 2025 we want to become an impulse generator for some of the pressing discussions of our time, discussing from a multiplicity of perspective what generally sustainable development is, maybe, or is not, but also what just transitions in plural may mean and how we may contribute to that conversation. So I'm very thankful for everyone being tonight here and in Colombia this afternoon, and I continue with I give back the word to Jesse, who's moderating the next part of the session.
Thank you, Michelle. Good afternoon and good evening for all. It's a pleasure for me to be here, and I would like to share some talks with you. I will try to present some points on ecocentric sustainability for our dialogue today. I start by saying that the idea concept of application or sustainability development is not the sustainability I want to approach on this dialogue. In a very succinct way, I could say that the sustainability development has been an empty and vague ethical call for intergenerational equity with no content or practical implication for changing the state of affairs we live in. Sustainable development does not question unlimited economic growth on a finite planet, nor the exacerbated consumption patterns of the countries of the global north, let alone the unequal and inequitable structure of the development model. It is something like, let's keep doing the same thing and call the same thing by another name, so that they believe that we are changing. It is a discourse that it is functional to the colonial practices of dependency and imposition of the countries of the North on the countries of the South, the global South, and that continues to consume and destroy the planet, ecosystem, and people with great voracity. On the other hand, the idea of development that we have been led to believe is being strongly challenged by various communities in Latin America who feel that they are victims of the development that, rather than beneficiaries of it. In the midst of these debates and the realities that are imposed, there have coexisted practices and experience that continue and others that emerge and are constructed, and thus it is possible to make visible other ways of living, inhabiting and being in the world that remain despite development. I have already talked about what ecocentric sustainability is not. Now, I will talk about what it could be. Ecocentric sustainability are all those ideas, concepts, debates, and practices favorable to human and non-human life, and it could also be the utopia to which perhaps we should transit if we aim at changes and transitions that should be economic, social, political, technological, civilization changes, so that they can have some positive effect and not be the continuity of the same. An idea of sustainability, as we have thought of from Latin America, is one that understands that today's social and economical process, anthropical process, cannot be carried out without ecosystem and their functionality, as they are irreplaceable and fundamental for the continuity of the life and the cultures. Farmers, indigenous communities have found in ecosystemic functionality their means and ways of life in an adaptation way, and of course using and transforming ecosystem, but without lending to their depletion or extinction. Sustainability understood as the possibility of permanence should guarantee the continuity of social groups with economical, symbolic, cultural, and non-human nature relations, but in other way, and force that the capitalism, extractivism, and development will never be able to understand, and let alone assume. That brings me to the issue of the deep crisis of insustainability that development models around the world have generated. Sustainability that is the product of same non-human nature only as a resource to be extracted and to generate wealth for a few people and consequences for many others. As ecosystem and biodiversity are transformed or lost, the livelihoods of the most vulnerable communities are lost. But we too, a large part of the population, have adopted these ideas of success and development as our own and unique, and Thus, in this way, we wear great responsibility for being part of this insustainable way of living. All of the above has led us to the current profound crisis, which no one can deny, any which is not only an ecological crisis, but is a crisis of the civilization. A crisis among others of the way of constructing knowledge, how we construct the knowledge that has been ecocentric, colonial, and hegemonic, and that is an addition to wielding their power in many ways, have also denied and made invisible other ways, other knowledge, other epistemologies, other rationalities that propose different relationship with non-human nature and other relation between the humans. These other epistemologies have long been shown to be more sustainable. That so-called development, whatever it might be. This leads us to consider some ideas for initiation a such dialogue on this issue. First of all, it is necessary to make visible, understand, and work together with these communities, with these sustainability proposals and practices of life, such as the epistemologies of the South, the throw of the earth sentipensar in Latin America, Ubuntu, for example, or Sumacamania in Latin America, more other proposal, and among others, secularity, then that they need, but traditionally present in the practice of the communities. These practices and knowledge need to continue to emerge more strongly, and their wisdom needs to be recognized. This goes beyond an inter and transdisciplinary perspective. So, a dialogue of knowledge in order to get to know these other words, thinkings, these multiple rationalities from which we will have much to learn. For their end, possibility lies part of the hope and the possibility of emerging from this profound crisis of civilization. In the other way to understand and recognize the importance of maintaining ecosystem functionality or the functionality of the biodiversity. Ecosystems are irreplaceable, and any activities, any economic projects will never be able to generate the benefits for the life that an ecosystem produces, generates. As people in academy, we must deepen our understanding and dissemination of these ideas and integrate them into what we do, as well as work for a alternative in order to build on them this proposal, this knowledge that is so important. This may be some of the challenges to be faced in this South-South dialogue. Thank you, Thomas.
Okay. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for coming out. I must say I've been in this community hall many times because I used to work here, and it's so, I still feel like uneasy with being in person. I'm also getting very used to it. So yeah, so thank you for coming out. And yeah, the title of I use this title, Just Transitions Otherwise. And in case you're wondering about that, is to follow on from Rosario, is that there are many knowledges in the world and many ways of living and ways of being. But for some reason, the Eurocentric and Western culture dominates the way the world is organized. And so many peoples, indigenous peoples, peoples of color, Black people, ways of being have been othered. And perhaps in our moment of ecological crisis, the global pandemic, our deepening inequalities and divisions, it may be necessary to look into what the otherwise has to offer as alternative ways. Thanks. I'm used to my Mac. So today we went to visit the Philippi horticultural area, Veg Corp specifically. Nazir's here. Him and other wonderful earthlings have cultivated this polyculture farm. And I thought that I introduced this because Nazir reminded us today that Veg Corp is about farming for the future. And so a very important aspect for me about Just Transitions is about a new and different imaginary. And one of our African scholars, Kenyan novelist and critique, Nungui Wathongo, said they knew how to take but not give back to the soil. And that they is referring to the colonists that arrived onto our continent and turned almost everything into resources and minerals, and our soil was extracted. And so for me, part of Just Transitions will have to think about giving back and think through other values in the shift that we need to go through. Values of reciprocity, values that are life affirming, restorative, and a process that considers the planetary relationships of us humans and non-humans. And more importantly, also to restore our earth cycles. And so Veg Corp is in many ways an epiphany of cultivating food in ways that's reciprocal, in ways that's life affirming. It's a whole ecosystem and biodiversity cycle happening there. And just to relate this conversation, this part of the conversation to energy flows and cycles, I draw from an ecofeminist called Saleh, Ariel Saleh. And she talks about the importance of restoring our carbon, our water cycles, our nitrogen cycles. So everything at the moment is out of balance. And Sally notes that most indigenous people, men and women, already share those links. And she questions, are they willing to tell us how, us that are rather trapped in modernity's promises? Sorry, I'm not figuring this out. So a big part of for me, the normative approach to just transitions, and particularly in South Africa, is focused on transitioning away from a fossil fuel dependent economy, largely, through lowering our emissions. And a big part of the narrative is that the world is organized around fossil fuel extractives, coal largely. And there's this shift to greener, cleaner, low carbon energy. The wind turbines you see there, I'll speak about a bit more because that's the Tsitsikamma community wind farm, where in 2016, I started my research with the community that offered their reclaimed land to partner with Exara. Exara is our second biggest coal energy corporation, I think. And they've set up a clean energy company called Synerger. So Synerger is the partnership with the Tsitsikamma development group, the community, and initially there was a Black empowerment group. It was initiated by the late Mike Mzizi. He had this dream of wind turbines because he was exiled in Denmark to bring electricity to the community. Sadly, he passed away, but his company liquidated. Okay, will you do that? Thanks. Okay. Oh, the slide went a bit. Oh no. Oh yeah, things moved. But now I want to expand on the problem of green thought, because for me, this narrative is this shift to green energy, green buildings, green cars, yeah, everything quite green, and green is seen as more sustainable and cleaner and greener. One of my favorite scholars, Jason Werr, says the problem with green thought is that it is centered on environmental consequences of technology. And I'll pause there. So the technology is polluting, and then there's lots of pollution. So therefore, we must shift this technology to be more efficient. So yeah, centered on the consequences of technology and or industry, revealing apocalypse or collapse of nature that derives green politics into either or position, so either sustainability or collapse. And this collapse, we the modernists think in the collapse of the earth. But the earth will pretty much stay around, it will change a lot, and it's already becoming more hostile to us humans. Yeah, it will be in a different form. And so that's something we need to think about. But another part or question about this green thought, or this predominant focus on techno-scientific fixes for our climate crisis, is that among them is the idea that we just shut down the steam engines and coal plants and their contemporary equivalent, leaving intact the inequalities and their gendered and racialized cosmopologies upon which capitalism depends, all will be well. And when I speak now about my case study, look at the next slide, all isn't quite well. And I think that a lot of this conversation, and as Rosario said, is not questioning the economic growth obsession, you know, in these shifts. And so what you see there is the physical location. It's called Vitterklavos, where the Tsitsikamma wind farm is located. And what you see around is mostly dairy farms and some plantations. You can see some parts are quite degraded. It's not, so you can see the shadows of the wind turbines. But what also intrigues me about in South Africa is that most of our renewable energy projects that are run by these independent power producers is on the land of white farmers. This one isn't. This is a community that reclaim their land and half of their land. I think there's only 2 sort of community farms, but the majority of these RE programs, renewable energy independent power producers. Procurement program, I'm saying it wrong, but it's wrong, it's called REAP. I'm looking at Louise because she knows that too well. Or RI4P. Yeah, it's on the land of white farmers. And so, yeah, and they obtain rental from leasing these technologies. Next slide. Yeah, so this is the location, close look. I call it in the middle of nowhere, and you'll see the wind turbines around. Next slide. And so my research was to focus on the people that lived there and that they were consulted around the benefits that this wind farm would bring, and to hear about their experience, and also to look at the experience of the land and what the land may be telling us about this wind farms. Next slide. And many paradoxes emerge. I just put out one here, that these communities have offered their land for these wind turbines. Many of them can't afford electricity, and it's unfortunate, but our renewable energy system, all of the energy goes to the central grid. In these programs, many of these corporations have local economic commitments, but there are many questions around what were real changes that brings to the community. Next slide. And so I went there and had many conversations. And something that I found is that before this community was displaced in 1997 by the apartheid government, is that they had a relational connection to this land, and they cultivated their own food. They didn't have electricity then, but they had the sense of that we were living in harmony with the land and with each other. The next slide. Yeah, sorry, just to end that. But now they're in a situation where they dependent on remittances, and they are dependent on the income of the dairy farms and the wind farms, but their well-being is worse off than they were before they were displaced from apartheid. So I'm coming to the end now, and so here's a sort of addition to the aspect of just transitions otherwise, is that just transitions need a much more broader focus than this current technology fixed approach that's happening. And we need to look at just transitions in Earth's care. And I mentioned those principles of restorative, life-affirming, regenerative processes. Ariel Selle brings an invitation around a bioenergetics invitation, where energy is related to cycles and flows. And lastly, Escobar puts positives the emergence of transitional discourses that is looking at transitions altogether to a different world. And so a lot of my work and my focus through the 20 years was sort of on environmental justice and ecological justice and economic justice. But actually the work has to happen in the mycelium of the mushrooms. And there we have to recalibrate these relationships, our cognitive justice, affective justice, and our relational justice. And when we have these shifts in relationship with ourselves, with others, and our non-human worlds, that's when we work towards the well-being of the metabolic well-being, and use the metabolic intelligence also for me from the earth. So that's my last slide, but I must just read one line, and which is interesting, from a group of Indigenous peoples in Canada, and this is the paper from Kinder. If you want the reference, I can give it to you later. And they had termed this sort of their relationship with solar energy, solarity. And this formed solidarity amongst both humans and the non-human worlds. and it describes the relationships of the sun that orientates our collective energy and imaginaries from one of scarcity to abundance. And so for them, solidarities do not simply name a technological relation to the sun, but rather a broader social relation, reorientated from stocks back to flow. And so I suppose instead of seeing all these new precious metals, I don't know what the term is, but lithium and cobalt as like new resources, or the sun endless for our use, or the wind, we need to shift from this thinking of like stocks and extraction to more flows and cycles. I'll end there. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Jessie. Hello to everybody. Good evening to the people who are here. And also good afternoon to the people who is listen us in Zoom. For me, it's very special to be in this community center. It's a place with a lot of resistance, worker resistance, women resistance. So I'm really excited to be here to with you and to share what we actually work at the Universidad del Magdalena in the Caribbean region of Colombia. So here I'm going to talk about the transition from the territories, or in Latin America, territories has a lot of meaning. It means the cosmogony, the relation between people. It means the feeling with the that you belong to a place and how you feel about this place. So here I present you my research group with the undergraduate students. Most of them are undergraduate students, and also there are some graduate students. It's a multidisciplinary group. Some of them are environmental engineers, most of them are economists. And what we do is to visit all the cold region and so with the communities that are affected by coal mining in Colombia. Also, I need to explain that Colombia is the 5th largest exporter of coal. South Africa is the 4th, and all the coal that we export, all the coal that we extracted, almost 90% of the coal that we extracted is for exportation. So we have a lot of environmental conflicts because it's coal mining. Yeah. So for the last 5 years, my students and I, we have been doing some workshops in the territories, forums, all kind of activities in the territories, and also at the Universidad del Magdalena. In these workshops, we started to discuss about to build. Let me. Yeah. we started to build together agenda for the energy transition in the Colombian Caribbean. This is a book that we wrote that collect all the results of this workshop or these meetings that we had with the communities, and also we also had a workshop with the mining companies, with the government, try to understand about how to build together an agenda for at the beginning we were thinking about how to build an energy transition agenda, but now we think that we need to build together a broad transition. So for us, energy transition is not sufficient. I mean, we all know that the fossil fuels need to be in the soil because the climate change. But apart from this, we also need some changes in the structure of the society, in the production part, and also the consumption part, and also the relationship with the communities, the autonomy of the communities. So at the end, we conclude that the just transition must be designed and structured according to the condition of each territory, community, and society as a whole, not by imposing or hegemonizing identical commitment or objectives, which can disadvantage some when compared to others. Instead, these goals must be tailored to each population demands to achieve actual benefits and a genuine just transition. Also, the participation of the communities has a crucial role in the construction from the local level for the just transition agenda, attending to a reality of dependencies on coal, of the need to recover their territories, productive and labor diversification, and the creation of community productive projects. So we have here another book that we just published this year. This book is the Outlooks from the Law on Just Energy Transition in 3 lines: the gender, the territory, and the sovereignty. And we did this book collected with many organizations, institutions, and also with 4 women groups in the Caribbean region, 3 of them, and also in another 4 region in the center of the country. Was the 4 community of women that we work. Here you can see the activities that we did. The activities was conducted in 2020. It was quite hard because the pandemic came, but they sent us all the information. We diversified methodology in order to discuss with them the just transition and the gender in the just transition. So here we said that in the transition in coal mining territories, we said that for us is we need like 3 types of transition. The first one is the stop mining. The people there always ask for don't expand the limits or don't expand the mining, the coal mining, and also to stop mining for reparate the territories, for rehabilitate the territories. So this is the first transition that they require in the coal mining region. And the second one is transition towards energy democratization, because the communities that in this region, they are very close to the coal mining, but as well, the region has a huge potential in renewable energy, conventional and non conventional renewable energy. But these communities doesn't have electricity.
So because our electric system is very centralized system, and even they are very close to the solar panels farm, huge solar panels farm, and also wind farms, they don't have electricity. So they require that the transition also needs energy democratization for everybody, for all the communities there. And apart from this, we need to understand a broad and comprehensive transition that transcends the energy field and allows closing structural gaps and fixing historical injustice against vulnerable populations such as women and indigenous, Afro-Colombians, and peasant populations. Here I showed you the last also a book that we published with Felipe and others authors. The title of the book is For a Broad, Sustainable and Democratic Transition. In this book, we together discuss, okay, what type of transition we are going to discuss, what type of how to frame this transition. So we said that we need a broad in terms of it's a process that allows laying the foundation for a dignified, fair, and equitable life for all. This transition should be sustainable so that the social, economic, and environmental transition undertaken is framed within the planetary limits and democratic in a new social pact signed and the greatest possible consensus that dignify lives and is care convert in the center of the existence of living beings of the planet. You can see here in the picture that the center of this energy transition is the life. Here says vida in Spanish, life. The people should be also in the center. Women the center, all kind of the minority groups like farmers, Afro-Colombians. And you can see here the resources, the limited resources, but all should be in the center, should be the life. So in this book, we recognize that already exists a lot of community initiatives that open paths to a broad, sustainable, and democratic transition. And there are many transformative motivations to do that. So we recognize that in the communities, there are many initiatives, and there is a transversal motivation, which is ecofeminism and the empowering of women. We recognize that all the initiatives that we see in the communities is the common, is the ecofeminism and the power of women. We see that the food sovereignty and the community autonomy and some initiatives, for example, this one, the collective initiatives of House of Seeds of Life, which is the young people that has a bank of seeds and also interact and exchange knowledge with the farmers. And so here, I love this initiative. Is the Cultural House Chontaduro. For us, it's very important for the just transition, for the transition to rescue the Afro-descendant ancestral knowledge, because teach us the limits of the planet, teach us many values that we have been lost. Also, the popular and intercultural education of original of the indigenous people. So here we see an initiative of the Universidad del Magdalena that has a point in the indigenous region there in order to share knowledge. And also here is a school of local science, is a young people that are studying at the university. They help to the farmers, and all together they have restored their territories. Here we can see the motivation like solidarity and community work, peasant, who restore territories. So I finish with this quotation of Eduardo Galeano, that means that the process that are capable of transforming the world do not come from the above or outside. They always come from below and from within or inside. Gracias.
Thank you. Yeah. Are we going to do it? Oh, sorry. Speak into the mic. Yes, so this comes from a group called the Justice Decolonial Justice Collective, a group of people in Canada. And so the cognitive is about changing the way we think, and the we is the modernist colonial way of thinking, and they believe that our challenges and that we face in the world, it's not so much about knowledge, because there's lots of knowledge and humans are pretty intelligent. It is about the violent colonial modernity, Western modernity's way of being, and so that has to shift in the way we think. The effect is that when we understand that, and the way we work will have some effect on the way we do things. So you know, this is not also thinking in terms of, I'm just saying, you know, that there must just be the socialist revolution and everything will be fine. It is our effect in certain territories, in a context that creates that shift, and that we also work in a contextual situation. So so if I'm looking at Tuticaca, we want to think that community had no choice but to take the land back under conditions where they had to partner with the dairy farmers that chose to remain there and get remittance. They had a dream, and there was perhaps a possibility, if they got funding from the Danish, if the wind turbines were there, they could get some electricity and then sell it to the grid. But we don't have that option at this moment now in South Africa. They didn't have a choice to cultivate the way they cultivated food before. They didn't have the the choice to create a vegetable. So yeah, so for us, when I say us, people working in this work, is to have some effect that creates the change. And then this relational justice is understanding that everything in life is interdependent, and it's also a big shift from the Cartesian dualism, separation, man, woman, nature, thinking in terms of either or rather than both and. So things such as trade also don't exist in a relational understanding, and there's more reciprocity. So yeah, so it's a whole sense of and this aspect of life affirming, that when we build things, make things, we produce life. And that reminds me, I'm putting that Nazir soil, that soil is cultivating life and not death, like fertilize soil. So yeah, sorry, long explanation, but those are I guess that's the work that we have to do.
Very good question. That is the challenges that we face. Actually, for the government, they only recognize the energy transition. But for the government, the energy transition is to diversify the energy mix. So to have more renewable energy, conventional and non conventional energy, but they don't question what energy for what and for whom, and also actually this year comes out the national policy of transition energy, and there is a law also of transition energy that the focus is to benefit the multinational companies, to hydrogen, to many renewable energy, and all of that with coal and renewable energy in that region. But it's amazing, no? Because it's too much in that region, and the communities has the mining here and then the solar panel here. And so, and all the conflicts around these energy things. So it's hard, but we tried the way that we do it is through legal process in order to defend the human rights. This is the strongest argument there, is that the human rights are more, the argument is more stronger than the environmental impacts. So there are many lawyers, NGO from lawyers that help the communities to sue and to start a legal process. And also because Colombia is the country that is very dangerous to be a social leader. So if you are a social leader and you do like what Naomi claimed, Locradia, like a huge body in order to stop the mining, there are some groups that kill you. So always the communities work as a whole, as a group, and they receive help from the lawyers and to take these cases to the international courts, but in order to defend the human rights. And right now we face a lot of pressures from the government because the geopolitics of Russia invasion in Ukraine. So the government the price call is right now very high. The years before was very low, and the coal mining companies were thinking of closing because it was not profitable, was no money. And right now, the government is pressured that less extract, less expand the extraction, and less. And actually, they stopped one legal process of the diversion of an important river for an indigenous community. So they said that they stopped this legal process in order to leave the mining companies extract.
May I add something?
Yeah.
Yeah, for perhaps also to add a little bit on the context of the energy transition in Colombia. When we talk about coal, as Andrea said at the beginning of her presentation, we talk about a carrier, an energy carrier that is extracted almost exclusively for export. So not much of it stays in Colombia. And the same applies to the second or the bigger fossil fuel that we extract and export, which is oil. So above 62% of oil that is extracted in Colombia is exported. And the thing is, when we look at the energy transition, in the case of countries such as Colombia, you look at a transition that is not so much energy, because you don't need to substitute the oil that you are exporting or the coal that you are exporting, but the rents that you are generating, the fiscal income or the privately accrued income that is captured or appropriated by different actors, both in Colombia and abroad. And the main challenge of such a transition, and this is something that keeps us awake at night, is that it's not only a change in the energy system, but in the whole socio-economic and political fabric of the country. And this is something that not many people in public administration or the private sector or society are acknowledging, that a transition in countries such as Colombia, where rents are at the center of the extractive process, is more or less a change of the economic model. And that kind of transition has a number of implications that we're still beginning to understand in their complexity, because they go way beyond any techno-economic or solely disciplinary analysis, but they require a much more holistic and, as Michelle has shown us today, also more relational analysis.
Yes, so we must be very clear that this green agenda is an agenda for capital accumulation. And the geopolitics are also playing themselves out here. Global North and Global South. Who makes these products? You know, where's the material coming from to make these products? And South Africa is always on the road to capital accumulation. But the challenge with our government is that they have this one-way path, and that empowerment is always about including those that were left out through colonialism and apartheid into the capitalist productive system through Black economic empowerment. I'm speaking about South Africa, Black economic empowerment or shareholders, and so that's what they mean by inclusive growth in our country. So, but they leave no space for alternatives. They're all inclusive into this growth path. And so I bring that because it's an interesting example of a community in Kolobeni in the West Coast, Pondoland area, where our Minister of Mining wants to mine in that area. And that community has put forward their alternatives and their options. But there's just no place for to cultivate that. And so, yeah, so I myself am very skeptical about the Just Transition program that's out there, floating around, doing its rounds. You know, it may have the nice words about restoration, etc. But I also worked in government during the World Summit on Sustainable Development, and we went on a similar round, the National Strategy of Sustainable Development. That's almost 20 years ago. So yeah, so we must be very clear that this is an agenda for capital accumulation, and the work is the resistance work and what happens in between and in the cracks. And so I always see this Philippine horticultural area, that's sort of the work in the cracks that's emerging, and in other struggles, you know, in Cape Town, yeah. But yeah, we're gonna have a longer chat about the form, the strategy of capital accumulation. And there's a paper by a woman called Daniel Garber, and she says it's changed from what Harvey speaks about, capital accumulation through dispossession, to capital accumulation by de-risking, where the governments of the global south are standing surety. So the de-risking is for the investors. So they almost their terms are out there fully for the investors, and they have found ways to even get their capital returns before the investment. And our governments are using pension funds, etc., to stand surety for these big investors, like the renewable energy programs. So, and we have to be a bit more clear. I'm just thinking that's the work I don't want to do. I want to do the more interesting work with the community, but that political economy work needs to be done. Political economy. Yeah, yeah. So, do you want to?
Yeah. We think that the transition are different perspective, integrative perspective, and the situation of the land is the land and the produce food because is a important aspect, and it's an opportunity. The transition, an energetic transition, is an opportunity to evaluate the the form, the model of products, the food, I think, and try to do the other form. We need to change the revolution, green revolution. Green revolution is necessary to transport to other form to produce because all that we need to do is change the form that you have management the cycle of the elements, cycle the ecosystem. The planet is a great ecosystem, and we change the cycles. Change the nitrogen cycle, the CO2 cycle, all, and it's important the role that the produce food, because this activity produce so emissions and destroy the soil and contamination the soil, the water, and have the transition or other kind of agriculture is necessary. It's necessary. It's necessary because we produce so much emission, and it's a inequality system too. And it's necessary transit to the agroecology. Agroecology is so important, but agroecology not only as one system to produce food, but it's produce other kind of relation between the nature, between the water, between the communities. It's important to change. It's all kind of life as it is a transition. It's a transition in this aspect, and the transition is the transition. It's necessary to change the model produced, the model, the capitalism, the perspective of the development is necessary to change, and now it's imperative the transition, but the transition is the transition of the civilization. Or thank you.
Yeah, I would like to add also to that question that from the beginning.
Okay, but that doesn't matter.
I think it's not bad. From the beginning of this project, what? Yeah, from the beginning of this project, Tragics had one very big difference to other of the German climate and environment centers, and it was that it was the only climate mitigation project. So we were the only ones kind of focusing on trying to avoid climate change, while the others were very focused on adapting to it. And it has increasingly become our kind of unique selling point. And the second dimension of that was that since the beginning also, we knew that we could not be a coal project, because are the origin of much of our cooperation with Jesse, with Andrea, was that we were looking into coal transition, and we knew that we had to be more holistic. So not only looking at coal, but at energy systems in general. And if we wanted to talk about climate mitigation, then we also had to talk about land and agriculture and ecosystem conservation or restoration. So that's one of the main reasons why we have been intensifying the exchange with our colleagues at Universidad Nacional de Colombia, which have this focus on land use changes in one of or several of the front lines of where these land use changes are kind of destroying our chances to actually mitigate climate change, such as the Amazon rainforest or the savannas in eastern Colombia. And when you go to this question you made about capitalism, I think at the end of the day, there's no way of escaping that conversation. But that's not the starting point of Tragics. What we're doing is we're planting the seeds as you invited us to be able to exchange, because we are very well aware of another thing that Michelle mentioned before, and that is that there are so many layers of a very complex political economy in all of these issues that we cannot go from a point of departure where we say a consensus is there. On the contrary, these are the most controversial topics of today, of tomorrow, and we set sail from the huge diversity and dispute of ideas and views on development, on capitalism, on energy systems, on fossil fuel use, on land use, amongst many other things. So the invitation that Tragics is about is not to begin with consensus, or perhaps also to reach it, but to show that there is this huge diversity of criticisms, of proposals, of analysis that sometimes is not represented in panels or in lectures or in study programs, but that we may put like a small brick and contribute to that. So yes, we're not talking enough about ecosystem restoration, land use changes, land management, and agriculture. But that's definitely a central component of what we aim to do initially until 2025, and if everything allows, also in the 5 years that will follow. And that's the big opportunity that these Tragic projects provides, a kind of a unique opportunity to have long-term conversations between South-South and also North. You want to? Should we perhaps, if the public online has some questions?
Yeah, because we're gonna have to end soon.
Are there any questions? Okay.
This is the first 5
Yes. So in order to conclude, I can see that just transition is not only one transition. It means a lot of like a so much of like a diverse transitions in terms of agriculture, in terms of energy, in terms of gender as well. We haven't talked about the importance of gender in the just transition. So I agree with Michelle. As Arthur Escobar said, we are in a crisis, civilization crisis, and it's time that we need a huge transformation in the way that we live, in the way that we produce, and in the way that we consume. And also we have here students from different programs, and the idea is to do that in a multidisciplinary approach. The social science together with to the ecology science, to the engineering science. So it's something that we need to build together. And I think that what is very interesting about Dragons that put us thinking about how to pursue this transformation from different perspectives and from different expertise. So thank you so much for having me here. This is really such a nice place for resistance. I think this is also to say something to say that the just transition is like a resistance for changing, for the transformative way to see the things and to build as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you for all. I think it's a beginning of the discussion, it's a beginning of the process, because project is a collective construction, and we need all of you for construct the project. It's so much helps about the put a seed in our minds, put a seed in the soil, and we want to grow beautiful plants, beautiful hubs, beautiful actions to change the reality, to change the situation that is not good for the great population that have a consequence of the situation of the crisis we are involved. And I am happy to stay here and share with you. It's a beginning. We want to you walk with us in this hopes, in these sueños, in this proposal of change, dreams, in these dreams. Thank you.
I guess so. My take home is to have this difficult conversation and to ask beautiful questions. And so when there's this Justice Energy Transition platform comes to South Africa, or any of these renewable energy projects, we need to start asking the questions: is this life affirming? Is this reciprocal? Is this changing the social relations that built the coal plants in the first place? And if it's not doing that, then it's about capital accumulation, and perhaps for me, I'm saying that's not for me. I want to do the work in the cracks because the change is not going to be coming from governments or any of these global institutions. It is those of us that's going to be doing the work for this transition, in between the capitalist system. So, yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Thank you for everyone, both here and in the Zoom link for staying with us for these past hours. I'm very thrilled that this meeting could take place at all. We had to postpone it due to the pandemic for over a year. So I'm very happy to finally be able to see our colleagues and meet them in person, and all of you too. One very good friend of me told me that the best projects are those where you're not working or cooperating out of transactional motivation, but where you establish human beings, personal beings. And I think that's one of the main results of this conversation. We now see and hear the faces behind the ideas, and how are planting, as my colleagues were saying, these seeds for future conversations, for future cooperation, for future action. Not thinking that we will change everything, but hoping that we will at least change a bit. And I think that's the true reasoning behind planting seeds, that out of one, many more can follow. So yeah, I thank you very much for listening to us, and I hope you continue to participate in these dialogues. And especially also very much thank you, Jessie, for moderating and helping us with and of course Natalie for making possible for the whole translation and connection to Colombia possible. And of course the translation team at Pantuglot that interpreted our conversation. And also many thanks to the Indian colleagues at UCT that made possible this amazing.